And joining us now, member of the House Select Committee tasked with investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. NBC News, of course, has exclusive details on criminal referrals today. I know you're declining to comment on those referrals, but can you talk about what it has taken to put together this final report and how much legal credibility it has or doesn't have?
Well, it has been a pretty painstaking effort to put together the report, to assimilate the evidence that we found, to try to present in a comprehensive form all the different ways that Donald Trump and others tried to overturn our democracy, the multiple lines of effort, the pressure campaigns against state officials, the pressure campaign against the vice president, the fake elector plot. There was a lot to cover, and to do so in a way that would read like a narrative, like something that wasn't a manual for a carburetor. I think we succeeded. We'll wait for your determination. In terms of the impact of the referrals, we will have a vote on our report and referrals. If we do make referrals to the Justice Department, it is the expression of Congress and its belief that our democracy was attacked, that these were the people responsible, that these are potential violations of law, that we think that there's sufficient evidence to make that referral. That will be what we will be deciding today. And the department will give it what weight it believes it deserved. I suspect it will give it the weight supported by the evidence that we present.
And so, obviously, what one's opinion about evidence can be subjective. Are there any legal benchmarks or benchmarks that you can describe that would make an act qualify for a criminal referral?
Well, if you look, for example, Judge Carter was litigating a case where we were trying to get certain records and found that the crime fraud exception applied, and therefore we could get the records. In his opinion, it was his belief that based on the narrow subset of evidence that we presented to him, that the former president and others likely broke the law, and he identified several statutes that he thought were at issue. Ultimately, the Justice Department will have to determine whether there's probable cause to charge the former president or others, and they'll have to make the further determination before they bring such a charge that they think they can prevail at a trial, that they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I hope they will apply those same standards that they would to an ordinary citizen, to anyone, including the former president. That's what the Attorney General promised to do, and I think the country will hold the Justice Department to that standard.
Congressman Schiff, good morning. One of the more remarkable things about the committee's work has been your ability to continue to unearth new information about a day that we all watched. And, of course, there's been so much reporting and investigation about already. It's been obviously several weeks since we have seen you guys meet publicly. But even in that time, in this late hour, was there new information that you guys have been able to pick up, collect, new witnesses, new testimony, new evidence that will be part of what we hear from you today and in the final report released later this week?
We certainly have conducted additional interviews and depositions since our last hearing. But I think that the public has already seen in those hearings, the major through line here, the president's, multiple efforts to overturn an election he lost, an election he knew that he had lost, the resulting resort to violence at the very end. We're filling in, I think, a lot of the pieces. We showed the broad strokes during the course of those hearings. And even our published report is only going to be a small fraction of the evidence. We'll be releasing quite voluminous exhibits, including transcripts of these interviews and depositions. So there'll certainly be a lot of new material. But again, as we've seen the Trump presidency in the years since, it doesn't matter how many smoking guns you produce. There's an insatiable demand for a new smoking gun. We shouldn't lose sight of what has already been presented. And just to give you one illustration, the president meeting with his top Justice Department officials, he goes through the same entire litany of false claims of fraud. They knock each of them down and tell him essentially they're BS. And his answer is just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. Sometimes in a simple statement, you can see all you need to see.
Can I broaden it out a little bit to something that Hugo Lowell was saying earlier when he was talking about his conversations with the Justice Department and the amount of time that they are spending, or that they think is being attributed to all the different legal problems that Donald Trump faces. And they said it was about 80% on the documents from Mar-a-Lago, 15% on the January the 6th investigation, about 5% on the case down in Georgia. Does that put the kind of findings of the 1-6 committee in some kind of perspective? I mean, obviously, the charges that you will be proposing are incredibly serious, and yet the case that is most likely to get Donald Trump into legal problems, it looks like, is taking documents down to Mar-a-Lago. I mean, I'm just wondering how you weigh those two things.
Well, you know, as you say, our focus has been on January 6th and on the series of violations of law that took place on that day and in the run-up to that day. Those are, in my view, the most serious offenses, potential offenses. Mar-a-Lago, the Justice Department could very well determine, well, these are easier to prove, and we will move on those that are easier to prove, simpler, potentially less controversial. I think that would be a mistake to say, well, we're going to simply go with what we can most easily demonstrate rather than what is most serious. Now, if what is most serious can be proved and can be proved beyond a reasonable doubt, then I don't think you can simply rely on, say, the charges, potential charges around Mar-a-Lago. So this is a decision prosecutors have to make all the time in far more routine circumstances. That is, which charges to bring where the evidence supports multiple charges. But here I think it would be a mistake if the evidence supports a charge and a potential conviction to, for some reason, decide, well, we're not going to go with those charges because there's something easier to prove.
Congressman, what are your thoughts on the entire process in the House of Representatives, the legislative process, the political process, in that you are about to issue a final report on a cataclysmic event in this country that's nearly 2 years old. It will be 2 years old this coming January. And that final report will then be in the hands of the majority in the House of Representatives, the Republican Party, who will do everything they can to oppose everything, nearly everything in that report. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, there are two components of our work on the January 6th committee. The first was to conduct the oversight, to share with the American people the facts, to expose those facts to the public glare. I think we've done that, and I think we've done that in an unprecedented way. But the second responsibility is to bring about reforms needed to address the deficiencies that made us so vulnerable on the 6th. And we will be making recommendations for those legislative reforms, but the vast majority of them will not be law by the end of this session. And so, you know, to contemplate going into a new session where, you know, people who voted to overturn the election will be essentially running the House of Representatives, you can imagine how difficult it will be to take these additional steps that we need to protect the country. So I'm deeply concerned about it. You know, I think in these hearings showed just how close we came to losing our democracy, but we're not out of the woods. And there's some simple, I think, fairly common sense steps we can take to protect the country. But of course, the new majority is going to be far more interested in Hunter Biden's laptop or who knows what else.
Yeah, yes, they will. Yes, they will. Member of the January 6th Select Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you for being on this morning. We'll be watching today.